Welcome to EduDesign, Building Justice-Focused Teacher-Led Professional Learning Communities. This is the fourth and the final webinar in the 2024 Connect Ed webinar series. And in this series, we have been having conversations that explore ways that we can center equity and leverage community voice in service to joyful and thriving generations. My name is Deborah Massachi. I work in the Connect Ed Office for Professional and Community Learning, and it's my pleasure to welcome today's panel. We'll be hearing from these wonderful and dedicated educators, each teaching in a different context and bringing with them different backgrounds. Some of our folks here today are at earlier points in their careers than others. They have different experiences inside EduDesign as participants and teacher leaders. Some are alumni of the University of Washington, others graduated from other teacher prep programs, and they also work in a variety of different districts. So today's panel will be led by myself and my amazing colleague, Gwen Sweeney, who is the college's retention specialist for our teacher education program. And before we get going, I just want to note that we are recording the webinar today. And we're doing that to share it with folks who wanted to be here but couldn't make it. So we want to make sure you know that we won't include your image in the video without your permission. So we want you to feel free to fully participate. And we hope to have some time for questions toward the end of the webinar. So please share your questions and comments in the chat as they come up, and we'll do our best to address them. And I also just want to remind you that closed captioning is available in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we invite you to introduce yourself in the chat as we get going. So to get us started off, I want to share a little bit about kind of what the role of the EduDesign model is. EduDesign is really a key part of the college's strategy to support our alumni and to support other teachers in our region. And that is around retention. We know that teacher retention is a really critical issue in our region and across the country. And this is especially true for our BIPOC teachers and for teachers who are working from a critical and intersectional social justice lens. This is especially important in this time of like book banning and attacks on critical race theory and queer teachers and students. And so we're really proud of our work around supporting teachers to continue in the work. EduDesign also really helps us think about how to support teachers to grow their capacity for justice-focused pedagogies. And it's a means for building meaningful and connected community that teachers can count on throughout the year. So that's sort of like why EduDesign, but you might still be wondering, what is EduDesign? So EduDesign are learning communities that are really come from a unique peer-to-peer approach to ongoing teacher learning and teacher retention. Each of our learning communities is led by a team of teacher leaders, and those folks are not positioned as experts in front of the room, but rather as co-learners alongside fellow participants. Cohorts provide space for participants to build community, to make sense of big ideas together, think about what those big ideas mean in their day-to-day practice. It's also a place for people to support one another as professionals, and of course, to grow their justice work. And ultimately, EduDesign supports teachers really to learn and thrive in order to support students to do the same. So a little more about why we do this work. We know that research shows us that there is a critical role for there's a role for critical professional development to support the retention of teachers and their justice work. And we know also that typical professional development often focuses on sort of the technical parts of teaching or the classroom management parts of teaching. And we also know that teachers still need critical spaces to do the reflection, the growth, and to kind of support their ongoing commitment to justice work. And that's what this work is about. So you might be wondering, how does it work? It works in an ongoing way. Oops, sorry. Each cohort has 6 clock hour granting sessions throughout the year. Each cohort is led by a group, is co-planned and co-facilitated by a team of teacher leaders. The work is really responsive. Each year is shaped by a set of guiding questions, but also by related emergent needs and interests of teachers. And then finally, it's supported. The college supports this work through staff and faculty, as well as just the scholarly and community resources of the teachers. So what do teachers experience in something like EduDesign? Every year we survey our participants, and in 2022-23, we learned that 96% of our respondents shared that EduDesign was an important part of their support for the year. And we learned that the top 3 ways that they felt supported was as professionals, including around leadership skills and confidence. They also felt supported as justice educators, and they supported around their sense of hope and well-being. So that's what the numbers have to say, but we have some really amazing teachers here today who are going to be able to share about their actual experiences in EduDesign communities. So I want to say thank you to those folks who are here today. And with that, I'll move away from our slides and we'll get ready to hear from some of our folks. Gwen, do you want to get us started off?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Deborah. I'm going to put the question in the chat, our first question to get us started. Thank you for the background and introductions. And the first question is, how would you describe what EduDesign is and how it's different from other professional development? And Naomi, would you be willing to go first?
Sure. Thank you for having me here today. I started my educational career close to 20 years ago, and in that time, I've had a lot of professional development, a lot. And what I loved about EduDesign is that you do and we do what we want our students to do. So instead of preaching that this is the best way to teach, we will give you the information, but in a way that is not necessarily best practice. EduDesign is different in that the ideas shared, the community that's built, and the way in which it is led is all very much community driven, teacher driven, and we use the same skills we want our students to demonstrate, which is reflecting and speaking and thinking and writing and engaging our ideas and our souls and our hearts and, you know, all the parts that make us whole as educators and as people.
Thank you. And when another person like to share their thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I'll share it. So the difference for me from EduDesign and professional development, I would say the PDs are a little more formal. There's, you know, you're usually with the same group of people, and there's usually boundaries in those groups. So I think, and there's a lot bigger groups too. So it's you know, it's a big old formal training that you're getting for your job. But EduDesign is a little smaller group. It's a little more intimate. I think you get to really connect with people more. You don't have that, you know, strictness of a work type PD. So these connections that you build are, I feel, a little more authentic because you're just, you know, you're not with the person you see every day. You're with people that are around, you know, the district or around the state, and you can share ideas and information with them, and you know, and also more than that, right? And build a community that is, you know, genuine. So that's what it's like for me.
Thank you, Sopad. Anyone else on this?
I think also one of the big differences for me was that EduDesign is all chosen, right? The people who come to EduDesign want to be there and want to engage in that learning. So the engagement throughout our sessions together is just so much higher. And then you have people who are going to schools and implementing the things that you're talking about in your cohorts and bringing that feedback back. So you're knowing that the cohort, it expands beyond the cohort, and those things that you're talking about are being put into practice. Which is just another really cool thing to be a part of. When I always said that it was like the PD and the group I wanted to go to, even though I was so tired and burnt out from school, because it was just this group of like-minded people who all had a vision and a direction that was the same and a passion for the same thing. So it was just a really different group to be a part of, because unlike district PD or school PD, everyone wanted to be there. So I just really like that aspect of it too.
Thanks for sharing those perspectives.
I can ask the next question. The next question is, what is your practice and/or thinking changed? How has your practice and/or thinking changed since your involvement with EduDesign? Does anyone want to get us started off with that?
I can start us on this one. One of the huge things that I took away from it was Dr. Goldie Muhammad's framework, specifically the pillar of joy. So often we're told, implement SEL, culturally responsive teaching, and then not necessarily giving the tools or the professional development in order to implement those things. And through EduDesign, I was able to really latch onto that pillar and learn how to equally prioritize joy and progress within my classroom and my practice. Often it's make sure kids are on grade level standard. Are you doing intervention? And we forget about the whole person. And with centering joy, it becomes more than just curriculum and progress. We're really seeing the whole child and the whole person as the educator.
Thank you, Haley. Does anyone else want to jump in on this?
Sure, I will. I was part of the inclusion cohort, and there's been a lot of talk about like UDL and universally designed learning that I've heard, or people talk about it, but through the cohort and the PD, it was presented from colleagues that are actually doing the work in classrooms and passionate about it. And it was presented, oftentimes PD is presented in some of, for teachers, it's how you would not teach your class, right? And so not super engaging. And they used UDL principles to actually teach it. So it was kind of felt like I was a student going through. I could choose from a podcast, or I could choose a video, or I could choose, something to read. And so it really got my brain thinking, firing on a different level about like what really is UDL and how can it be used in a classroom. And so just super excited to then bring it, that next Monday, Tuesday, talk to colleagues and bring it to the staff meeting and talk about just how we can implement it in our classrooms at school. And it's really kind of taken off at our school. So it's been really exciting.
I love that. Thank you, Phil. Does anyone else want to respond to this? How it's impacted your practice?
I think that when I first started teaching, I felt really isolated because, as a new teacher in a community that didn't have a lot of new teachers, or just even as a new teacher in general, and I really craved like a community like I'd had when I was in my teaching program. And then the next year when I joined EduDesign, I realized like that space, having that community to learn something that isn't like so tied up in the specifics of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and can help you kind of understand and unpack that like bigger reason of why you're doing something, and what you're doing actually translated to more, I feel like, practical things in the classroom than necessarily just focusing on the minutia as you tend to do in your school setting. So I feel like having that community of people to who had similar goals and desires in terms of what they wanted to get out of teaching, especially focusing on justice-oriented teaching, and having, like Haley was mentioning, actual things to go back with and bring to your school and bring to your classroom to kind of create part of the change that they have been wanting to see.
Yeah, thank you, Janaki. I think I just wanted to add in that you're hearing a variety of experiences from each of these teachers because of their different roles and because of the different cohorts, because each cohort, there's no prescribed curriculum. Each year, the group of teacher leaders decides what is it that we want to take up this year? What's important? What are the guiding questions? So if you're thinking, wait a minute, they're saying different things, it's because they've had different experiences within their cohorts that was customized and designed by their teacher leader staff, which some of them are participants in that teacher leader team. So that's why you're hearing a difference, and it varies from year to year. I think if there's anyone else on this one, or I'll go ahead and ask the next question, which is, how does EduDesign support your humanity in teaching?
I can answer this one. Well, like a lot of everybody mentioned, is the community part of it. You know, it reminds us that we are part of this community, whether it's a larger scale or a smaller scale. And we, you know, when we recognize that, we see that, you know, our students aren't so different from us, and the families that we work with aren't so different from our families. You know, they have needs, right? They want, you know, things for their kids, and just like we do, just like my parents did. And, you know, all of us are from different backgrounds and different circumstances. But we all want to just, you know, be a part of something. So it makes me just think that, you know, the struggles that I had growing up or the success that I had growing up, everybody shares those things with me.
Yeah, thank you, Sopai.
I wanted to build off of that. I wanted to mirror and say that I feel like I'm able to show up as my most authentic self with EduDesign. Like so many of other people have already said that it's not like your scripted by the book PD. It's this beautiful marriage of your most authentic self, your activism, your career, and your passions that come together, and it's a space where you can really blend them together and create an applicable idea or outcome, and share that with other professionals that share those same passions and goals, and that want that to be the experience for their students. So it's that first step of really mirroring what we want for our students by taking those steps and doing it ourselves, and then also eliminating that barrier of how am I supposed to show up as a teacher? How am I supposed to manage this and all of the state testing and what is expected of me? Instead, you're just there in your humanity, in your authenticness, and engaging in that with other professionals that also want to be there and share that same love of teaching at the same time.
Thank you, Deja.
Yeah, thank you, Deja. I feel like I'm always amazed at how each of our cohorts, the folks in that cohort, create exactly what you just described. It's not something that someone is, it doesn't come from outside. It comes from everyone in the group, and people being willing to be their authentic selves and be vulnerable with each other and share about their struggles and offer each other support. That's just so amazing and beautiful to get to see and be a part of. It's related to, it kind of flows right into our next question around what does it feel like to be a part of the EduDesign community? Does anyone want to add on there?
I'd love to jump in. Often with other teacher communities, it might not necessarily be overt, but there's an undercurrent of competition or showing one another up. or in some cases antagonism. Maybe it's just the workplaces I've been at. But true collegiality of seeing one another not just as fellow teachers, but as fellow humans, and humans with flaws, with strengths, with virtues, with vices, who love music and art and food and ideas and have this passion for this work, as Daisha mentioned. It's very safe. EduDesign is a very safe place.
Yeah, I wanted to mirror that. It also feels just very validating. As someone who is newer in my teaching career, newer in taking on leadership roles, like I've been part of EduDesign as a participant and then also as a teacher leader. And I don't think there's very many spaces where my style of leadership or how I show up as an educator is as celebrated and as embraced as it is in EduDesign. I don't work or operate or think how most like traditional teachers probably do. And I have felt that like undercurrent of, oh, maybe you're not doing it right, or maybe there's like a level of competition, whereas that's not present in EduDesign. It feels like a very authentic place where everyone's approaches and ideas are valued and validated. And also, even if you are the teacher leader or facilitator, you're still learning and getting so much from it. So I feel like being part of EduDesign community just overall is extremely validating and supportive all around.
I'll add on that one of the mottos that was always stated on slides and verbally was "come as you are." And that was so meaningful to me, especially when I felt so drained and depleted after a week of school and coming to a Saturday session by choice. And I would always leave with my cup overflowing and feeling supported and validated. I oftentimes feel like focus on your locus of control is weaponized within our school system, especially when there's systemic issues that are affecting us. And coming to these communities and sharing our feelings about certain things that are restricting us within the system, it's not leveraged as like, well, focus on what you can control and smile and move on. It's like, no, that's really hard. And we're human and we're in this together. And it felt like a family that genuinely cared about each other's well-being and success.
I just want to add on to that after hearing what Haley said and everyone else about how like it's a safe space, and sometimes the system really is hard to like try to do something against, I guess, or but there's many times where I felt defeated, and I wish that I had EduDesign for the weekend so I could re-energize myself. So every time I do go back with the group, and I feel like I get back on Monday, I'm ready to go, and it's it's good. It's a good 2 weeks after that before I feel defeated again. But yes, EduDesign definitely helps me feel re-energized going there.
I don't know if we're past on this topic, but I think the word that comes up for me is empowered. Like there was so much empowerment in just being a part of the sessions and seeing people, and then having been a leader, like coming up with quality content that, I felt and we as a team felt was empowering for teachers, like spreading that feeling to other people. And then, like you're saying, like going back and being like, we talked about this weekend. I'm ready to go. I got these ideas. I'm ready to rock and roll. Or like going into, next school year, like I have some food for thought going into next school year to share with, PDs at the beginning of the year. But it just empowers you, I feel like, in so many different ways to like move you and propel you into that next phase of just being a leader and an educator. It's such a cool thing to be a part of.
Thank you all so much. I have a question that isn't something that we sort of shared with you all before that we would be asking. And that is just I'm curious if anyone has is willing to share, and it's okay if you're not, but I'm curious if anyone is willing to share something about how we talked about kind of how you've been changed in your practice, but just kind of how it's impacted you as a person. If you feel like there's some particular learning that you were able to do in EduDesign. I know I've gotten to talk to many of you about this idea of how it's kind of changed the way you interact with your colleagues, or the way that you understand some of the ideas that we've discussed. And I just want to open up space for people to share something like that. And it's okay if you're not comfortable sharing that here too.
I'd love to start. This has been by far the hardest year I've ever had in teaching, and today in particular has been a really, really hard day. And being part of this webinar has been something I've been looking forward to. But I feel like often in education, we are expected to see students as whole people and to respond to students as whole people, but we ourselves become automatons and robots, and we are the providers. We are the givers, but we are not seen as to be given to. And something that has really changed for me with EduDesign is I see myself not just as a giver, but as someone of being worthy of being given to and being of value and taking up space and having a voice and using that voice. So that's really been a powerful mind shift for me. And it's all mental. Nothing in actuality has changed, but I deserve to take up space.
Thank you.
For me, so as teachers, we all come with, skills, through our live experiences, and we also have these technical skills that we've learned through our preparatory programs. However, those skills are useless if you can't use them, or if you don't use them within the field, inside the field, right? And it's easy for some of your talent to be suppressed or to be shut down because of how the system is. So with EduDesign, like, I feel like, okay, I gotta, like, muster my, my strength to, like, really, advocate and really use what I've been trained to do to, to support my students, and to call out things that are against, my teaching philosophy and just what I see in education as a whole. So yeah, I definitely see that as not just, when I go to work, but also when I'm just hanging out with friends and, calling them out as well. So it's done more than just me as a teacher, but also as an individual who can also, call out my community members and let them know, like, hey, this is not how not what I agree with, or something, to say it nicely.
I also think that kind of Naomi, I think, hinted at this at the beginning, but there's a lot of opportunities to be the learner and be the person who's the recipient of these kinds of experiences that we say we want for kids in schools. And I think that I'm thinking, just to like a few weeks ago when we had our last one, or multiple times this year, of times where I felt like there was like a sense in some of the activities that we were doing that of being like a whole person in a space where you were with other educators. And I feel like, the staff meetings that you go to and the other things that you go to, like, that is a very, very rare feeling. I feel like as a teacher, like you were saying, Naomi, of being like the provider, the person who has to provide all the structure, who has to hold it together, and to kind of just like be in like nature or in creativity or in conversation with other educators who sort of share this same deep belief about what education is as you, I think it's like a very healing community just in its existence. And I think that that's because of the way that it's run and fostered. And I feel like that allows me to go into these spaces where it's maybe more hostile and not completely fall apart for at least 2 weeks, like Sopat said.
Thank you all.
I think in listening to you all, one of the things I'm struck by and that we also hope for is that you all have you're all coming in at different places, and what you are getting out of EduDesign session to session or year to year is different. We're not looking to have the same outcome of everyone's going to leave with these 3 things, that it's customized to where you are in your career, where you are in your life, what you're needing right now. And I know for some people it changes, right? From that first session of the school year to the last session can be very different depending on what life brought at you during that school year. And I think that's another important thing. I know when I participated in PD as a high school teacher, there was always these same outcomes that we were all supposed to have from whatever it was. And I appreciate that it's set up that you can offer and take what you need from the space. And that's, I think, also what makes it so special.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate you saying that, Gwen. We will have a little bit of time for other folks if they have questions. So as you're thinking about them, one other question that we have is, what do you think schools or districts might learn from what we do in EduDesign? Does anyone want to start us off?
I'll start. I think that one of the most impactful things is after every cohort, we do that survey. Like everyone in the cohort ideally participates in the survey and gives feedback. And then we as a leadership team take that feedback and like analyze it and use it to plan what's coming next. And I feel like typically in district-led PD or even school-led PD, it's just an agenda. We have to talk about this and we have to talk about this and growth goals and data, where it's not like need-driven, it's just agenda-driven. And I really like about the cohort is that there's the flexibility to kind of ebb and flow with like what the cohort is wanting, and wanting to focus on, where that's just not a thing with district PD, right? So I think that's one of the coolest things about it is that it has that. And I think the district could really leverage on, I don't know, like asking teachers what they want or where they're at or what's important. Like checking in with people is pretty important. And at least in my district in North Shore, that doesn't always happen. It's just always an agenda piece. So I think that could be a huge leverage point for districts for PD to learn from EduDesign.
I'm gonna build off Angela with the fact of like real and authentic check-ins. We're so busy grind culture. One thing that I really took away was like dismantling the white supremacy culture within our systems and recognizing that within my work ethic or like how I move as a professional, really shifting from like standardization to what humans need, because it needs to be human centered. We're more than data. Our kids are more than data. And shifting from like a top down model to a shared decision making practice, focusing on collectivism instead of individuality, and just focusing on community support. And one of the things we did was a community asset map to identify and leverage local resources and strengths. It really humanized and built a supportive network of the community around my district or wherever the person was from. And I think we need to focus more on people, less on data. I mean, there's a happy medium that can be achieved.
I can go next. There's been a bunch of times where I'm like a professional learning community or put in one right now. And it's special educators around my district, but none of us ever talk. It's just top down. We're just told things. And so it's EduDesign was like, it was a true community. We were coming together. I felt like I had a voice and was learning from other people and inspired and empowered by what others were doing and taking from that. where most of the PD I go to, you know, our opinions don't necessarily matter. It just, we're supposed to absorb this information, regurgitate it, and there's no discussions or there's no learning. So this felt like a true PLC, which was awesome.
Yeah, I wanted to echo kind of what everyone else just said, that it was so reactive and fluid to what was being needed at the time. And like we were constantly reflecting and seeing our input being taken and applied in real time, which as an educator, that's not something I'm necessarily used to. Sometimes the feedback is going into oblivion, whereas we would get feedback and by next session, like we're doing things differently. We are responding and we're meeting the needs of the participants, of the facilitators. And it wasn't this idea of, like Phil said, just like absorbing information. It really was a community conversation where we are all taking and feeding off of each other and facilitating with each other versus so like top down, just giving us like an info dump. And we're learning from people who are in the field and actively trying and failing and fixing and responding to the same things we are. So it feels very authentic and it feels very natural, and there's not this sense of power or control. It is just learning and community and these relationships being built in real time. So I think again, like what Haley said, making it a more centered, like human-centered approach and really dismantling those white supremacy norms that are working within our systems and the way we run things. And then shifting this idea of there being a keeper of knowledge or an expert in anything, and really creating a space where we are all facilitating and learning from each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the idea of teachers leading their own professional development is something that districts can definitely take, not as a way to like put more on teachers' plates, but like as a way to offer, like, instead of traditional models of PD, like I guess just imagine like what's possible in terms of what do people want to learn and how could they be supported to share that and their areas of expertise and have more of a communal feeling, because I don't know how useful or enjoyable anyone finds traditional professional development models. And so it seems like a pretty good, reasonable thing to think that this type of model has a lot of reason to be considered more widely than just sort of this one space.
I'm just noticing that there's a question in the chat. Someone is asking, what drew you to EduDesign? What were you grappling with or needing that led you to join an EduDesign cohort? I'll open that up.
I can answer that to start with. All right, so originally it was clock hours, all right, for me. And no, now the more that I think about it, though, there's a connection to like the capitalist system, though, because of producing, wanting more production, right? Getting more clock hours, getting more numbers, getting that higher pay, moving in step, and all these things, right? Just to fulfill my, I guess, capitalist, nature, right? But that's what I came in for. I was like, I'm a new teacher. I need some clock hours. I want to make sure I get all these, CCs, so I could just speed up this production right here, right? And then I got there and I realized, I'm not I'm not really doing what I think I should be here for, right? I'm here. And then I end up being, part of this community that was beyond these clock hours, right? I think you can't really put the number of clock hours to really to describe this this EduDesign cohort and thing. All right, you just clock hours are great, right? That's what I went in for. But now I'm realizing like, yo, this is just beyond that, So I could also figure out how to get clock hours.
From like I was on year 10 last year, and I was doing initiatives in my school. I was on every committee I could be on. I felt like if I worked hard enough, I could fix the problems I was experiencing. And it was me, right? I could do my locus of control. If I work hard enough, I can do this. And so I ended up having to leave school one day, feeling like I was having a heart attack, knowing that it was just anxiety and panic. But the fact that I worked myself to that point, like the system I work in perpetuates that. It makes me feel that way. I wasn't born feeling that way. So then I got into education through a justice lens, and experiencing that sort of burnout, finding this cohort of like, how do we rebuild a system that we're currently working within, really drew me in, because it's like, hey, there's another thing I can do to try and fix the problems that I'm experiencing. And then having my eyes open and just realizing like, oh my gosh, it's not my fault, and it's like, as Naomi said, it's like we are humans and we're expected to give, but not often treated like whole humans. And so I left, like I said, with my cup overflowing every single time. And I learned so much about work-life boundaries and language to speak the feelings I was having of like, hey, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be on this committee. I'm not going to do this. This is what I'm going to do instead. So it was a very valuable experience.
I think I was very similar to Haley of being in that burnout boat and kind of drowning. I had just moved to Seattle from Las Vegas, and I didn't know anybody, and I was working at a school that was a very different demographic than what I'm used to. And then I was very isolated and did not have I didn't have the community that I needed to thrive or survive in Seattle, or especially in the education realm. So I joined the BIPOC EduDesign, and I met some of my closest friends from there. Like I still hang out with them to this day, and we they're like my survival team, and they're the people that help me feel grounded and like safe and okay in Seattle. And it has led me to nothing but beautiful, wonderful things since then. And so now I'm like 3 years into Seattle, and I'm helping, I don't know, I'm on a panel with them. Like there's just been nothing that but good that's come from it. And so it just keeps drawing me back. And it's one of the spaces in my career where I feel the most validated and supported. And that's really hard to find when you are going against the grain, when you are showing up in a way that's different than the norm, when you have a mouth as big as I do. Like it's really hard to find somewhere where it's celebrated and embraced and okay to be that way, and you're not just like the teacher down the hall who won't stop talking about race and equity and calling things out in your building. Like you're actually in a community of people who are like, oh yeah, like you're not losing your mind, like this is happening, this is real. And like, oh yeah, other people are also leaving work with panic attacks. Like, oh okay, we're not by ourselves. Like it just felt really good to find your people that helped ground you in your work and also validate who you are as a human, and like just build those connections that weren't happening in my home building. So that's what drew me to it.
Beautiful. Thank you all for sharing. I see another question in the chat. This person's asking, how have you used what you've learned in EduDesign to influence or change things in your school or district? Does anyone want to speak to that? Great question.
I'll speak to that a little bit. I was one of the leads in the inclusion cohort, and we spent a lot of time crafting the content that we're sharing with the cohort. And I double dipped on that, and what I would support in the cohort and what I would learn through like the other leaders in the cohort, I then took that and pitched it to my principal, and I was like, hey, check out this really cool thing we were talking about in the cohort. We did what we did in Summer Institute, I brought, and we did in like our summer days at the beginning of the year this year. So like it's kind of cool because you get to see it roll out through the cohort and see how people are interacting with it in the cohort, and then tweak it and bring it back to your building and implement it in your building and teach it in your building. So that was really cool. Or there was one I even did the reverse. I practiced it with my building and then I brought it to the cohort because I knew I could double dip again. But those types of things, like, and just seeing how people in your building respond to it, and then a cohort of people who are really engaged in the learning respond to it, like really opened your eyes to a lot of different things. And then my principal would be, you know, pretty open to that. And then she's sharing it on like, hey, we were talking about this at our school. So just kind of watching it branch out in those little different ways, and taking with it what you will, or hearing Phil. Like, I love hearing your stories about what you've done with the information you've got at the cohort. Just knowing that it's spreading that way too, is spreading with your students, ideally with your staff. And then you have all these people that are taking it. And we did celebration stories at our last cohort at the end. And it was one of the most fun parts of that cohort, was just to hear all these celebrations that people had from implementing the work we talked about throughout the cohort sessions. It was really cool.
Thanks, Angela.
I can add one more thing. So at my school, we do a lot of projects. And so we were looking at data, and especially students with IEPs that I work with, and that they were not completing some of their classes, failing some of their classes. And part of it was about not having enough evidence of their learning. And so I was able to take something that the inclusion ed team of our cohort had given us, where it was like, you know, when I'm bringing it to the staff, when the gen ed teachers like already have, all of us as teachers have so much on our plates. So like it was even called one more thing. So just like one more thing, just do one more thing, add this one more thing to your class. How could students show you that they learned this in a formal way? Like just one more way that they could do that. So it seemed like it wasn't overwhelming anyone. And so I could introduce that and then bring out this, you know, small worksheet where it wasn't overwhelming, and that they can implement that in their classroom and it supports students. So that was great.
Thank you, everyone. I'm noticing our time. We have a little bit more time. If there's any other questions from our audience of things that folks are wondering, also if there are other things that folks on our panel want to share that there hasn't been an opportunity to share, but there's an idea that you feel like other teachers might benefit from. Just want to open space up for that as well. But it looks like actually we have a question in the Q&A. Can you share more about the kinds of things that you're learning about in EduDesign? Does anyone want to speak to that? I think we've shared a little bit about that.
I'll just say quickly, this year we had 5 cohorts. So just keep that in mind. We've got folks represented across 5 different experiences this past school year.
So in our cohort, the one that I participated in or helped with this year, it was early career teachers with a social justice focus. And so we really talked about what that looks like in your first few years in your early career path, and then talked about how do you sustain yourself and to sustain your practices, and then how do you build your own community and cohort within your school and within your building, so that it doesn't become such an isolating thing, and so that you can continue getting the ball and momentum moving without sacrificing or jeopardizing yourself. And then we also really looked at specific like obstacles that they're facing in their practice or in relationships, and really leaned into like community discourse on how to problem solve those or address those, or also just talking about like, is that even your job? Like, do you need to take that on? Is that going to better yourself and your practice? Is it safe for you? Is it best for your students? And so we got to really just talk about how do you center social justice in your early career, in the start of your early career, and in that going down that path, while also maintaining yourself and maintaining healthy, supportive relationships.
I know that in the BIPOC cohort, the intention that we had set at the beginning of this year, which I mean, sometimes they will shift or change slightly to year based on, people might be in them for multiple years, and like it's not just the same thing over and over. But I remember this year the conversations were around thinking about like, how can we create like a space where we are actively in this space using different pedagogies that we are not centering like white pedagogies that are maybe the most commonly seen in schools, or like the way that things are done in schools. Like we unpacked white supremacy culture, and trying to think of like, well, what can we do in this space to actually experience whatever it is we're doing in this space in a different way. And so a lot of it was kind of thinking about like, not just what the content is of what we're learning about. A lot of that was sort of brought in by people and their journeys and their individual experiences, and trying to think like, what do people need to share about or want to talk about in this space, but thinking about the way that we experience that as well was something that we focused a lot on in that group.
Janaki. I see one other question in the Q&A asking about cost and time commitment. Just quickly, I will share, we've been very fortunate for many years that the work has been funded through the College of Education. We hope that continues to happen in the future. And the time commitment is about 20 hours for our teachers that are experienced, and it's about half that for our newer teachers, for our early career folks. And I see we're getting really close on our time here, so I want to just thank you all so much for sharing about your experiences. And I have a couple of other bits and pieces to share with our audience here. Can folks see the slides? Yeah. This is just a sample of, we mentioned that there are guiding questions that sort of guide each cohort throughout the year. And usually there are maybe 5 or 6 questions. This is just kind of a sampling from a few different cohorts, in case folks are wondering what those might look like. And we're excited to announce that we'll have 2 cohorts that are beginning this fall. So in order to learn about those, we invite you to join our mailing list. Also, you can check us out to learn a little bit more on our website. You can reach out to us, email if you have questions. We'd love to talk with you. And you can follow us on social media as well. And again, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists for coming after school in the middle of your week toward the end of the school year. I know this is not an easy time to be here as a panelist or as a participant in the audience. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really grateful to have this time to think and learn together. And we want to let you know this webinar was organized through our Connect Ed office, which supports professional and community learning. And you can find out more about our upcoming summer learning and PD partnerships on our website. And with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you all so much. Please reach out with any questions or just to connect. Thank you.